Alright, so Guilty Gear World Finals 2024 is about to start. So, of course, we gotta do a tier list for Guilty Gear Strive Season 3.5. Now, basically the main reason I'm doing this is not just the finals. You know, things like EVO and Arc World Tour are really good times to talk about where we are currently in the game, but also there might be a patch and there's definitely going to be a new character. So I really want to give an update on my thoughts. 3.5 is kind of like 3.02, so I've mostly settled on how I feel about the cast. There's still some wiggle room. We'll talk about that later in the video. So first, before anything else, we have to build out the tier list. Alright, so as you can see on this handy dandy little chart, we have basically 5 tiers here. So we have wins, great chance to win, extra effort, bracket ruiner, and the bottom one is niche or power creep. So a couple of years ago at this point, I stopped doing letter tiers. Essentially, I have a video about why I did this if you're curious, but basically, the way that fighting game developers make characters these days, they're far more aware of like what makes a good character, what makes a bad character. So there are a lot more examples of many characters being really strong, and it's much harder to define like who is the, not only who is like the best, like a number 1, number 2, number 3, but then like what's the difference between like the 9th best character and the 10th best character. So I've started going with this kind of labeling format. It really fits more of like my perception on characters in this game, and fighting games in general, and I tend to look at characters from a more optimistic perspective, like, oh, they can do these things, or they could be developed more, or something like that. So wins is, I mean, is there anything more straightforward than winning? So these are the characters that are the most consistent in the game. You see these characters all the time in tournaments. You should not be surprised when you see them in top 8s. Not surprised to see these characters win. Not surprised to see multiple of these characters represented in top 8s. Then for characters who have a great chance to win, they definitely can win. They're definitely not as consistent as the characters that are straight up winning all the time. You may have to counterpick, but you probably don't have to. You definitely should not be surprised to see them in a top 8 either, but it would be pretty uncommon or unusual to see multiple of this. Then you have like extra effort. So these are characters that are still quite strong, but they also have like actual weaknesses. So I actually am going to be describing the characters a little bit differently than normal because I'm recording this. So normally I do this on stream, but stupid streamer LK had the music too loud. We're doing like this time. Okay, so the characters I put in extra effort basically almost require a counterpick, or you need really good bracket luck to be consistent, but they do perform. It is not super unusual to see one of these characters in top 8, but it is very, very uncommon that they actually win, and it is extremely rare that you'll see multiple of these characters in top 8. Also for those reasons, that the main things being that they have like some type of flaw, or they just have like bad matchups that you actually have to worry about. And then you have the bracket ruiner. So the people at extra effort, that's like the last line of like, yeah, these guys are getting top 8s all the time. The bracket ruiner, yes, you'll see them in top 8s. It's extremely, you're basically not seeing them win. But these characters are characters that will definitely ruin your day if you're not ready for them. And then for the characters under that, we have niche or power creep. So these are characters that, I mean, again, I think I labeled these in a pretty direct fashion. So either they're just hyper focused at doing one thing and they're really good at that thing, but their flaws matter a lot for tournaments, or they're a character that they just haven't like really like kept up with the rest of the cast in patches, or the devs kind of are like, this character's really good, it might be cringe, which might sound funny considering some characters are good in this game, but I just kind of, you know, it's me projecting a little bit. So with that, let's quickly make the list. All right, so this is pretty much my list. So I also want to add a couple things. So again, this is not in order. The only thing that matters is the groups. So like the assumption should be everyone in wins basically the same strength, everyone in great chance to win basically the same strength. If I think somebody, I've been doing this recently, if I think somebody is like borderline between the two, instead of adding an extra tier, what I normally do is add an extra group in between, but I don't do that anymore. Instead, I just say like I said, Kai and Chipp, they're kind of interchangeable. I actually don't think Baiken can clear that like go into great chance to win. I don't think she can the way she is right now. But if someone tells me, hey, Anji actually is slightly weaker than what you put him, I'd be like, okay, fine. Same with Bridget. So like if someone said Bridget was slightly better than what I put her, like one up, then I'm like totally fine, totally understandable. And actually same with Johnny and Elphelt. So that's an exception. So Johnny and Elphelt could also be in the group above. But with all that out the way, we're gonna go through each character starting from the bottom. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to talk about the character first, and then we're going to talk about the character's strengths and weaknesses. So starting with Zato, for example, Zato is probably the perfect definition of being a character that has gotten power crept. So this character was extremely polarizing and performed pretty well in tournaments despite his weaknesses. His main strengths is that he has a really clear game plan of you're supposed to fight with him and his shadow. He has really good anti-air and anti-anti-air. And because of the nature of the character, it's just hard to learn counterplay against Zato. However, his weaknesses are really huge. So right now he's really weak to system mechanics. So what I mean is that Eddie just dies so many ways between like YRC and bursting. These are all things that he used to be really good at baiting. His HP is very low. I believe he's actually bottom 5 HP. I'm sure you've seen the funny gun combo many times at this point. And this thing just does so much damage on him. I mean, it makes sense too. So not only does he have bad guts, but he has bad HP as well. So positive in his current form doesn't really benefit him. So he kind of does the same thing that he used to do still with sword, which is great and all. But the longer positive bonus definitely benefited him more than the current one, where it's shorter, you don't gain meter as fast. Going back to extremely weak to system mechanics, he can be removed from his ideal situation pretty easily and for an extended period of time. This is not common for resource characters. There's some resource characters in this game where you can't really remove them from their resource at all. So you're talking about characters like Goldlewis or Happy Chaos, where like Zato, he can be removed from Eddie for a very long time at this point. It's tough for me because as a Guilty Gear player playing Exord, I'm like, well, that's the old time. And I thought 3 or 3.5 seconds, whatever it was too fast. But for this game, especially because of how quickly he dies and how much easier people can convert compared to the old games, the old timer is too long. So he's in a kind of rough spot as far as that. And to top it all off, he's one of the characters that still doesn't have like the best conversion ability of all time. So next, we're going to talk about Testament. So Testament is a mid-range zoning character, and if you play this game, there's a lot of those, but I think Testament is one of the more pure ones. Like, there are characters who are mid-range zoners who, honestly, they're kind of just slamming backdash and trying to do projectiles, but Testament really does play at all ranges because of the way their game plan is set up. So Testament strength. So one is Testament game plan, again, is pretty clear, very easily to understand, that you want to use projectiles, get hit, set stain, pop the stain, and loop that situation over and over to build resources. Definitely one of the go anti-airs in the game is Testament. Testament both has a DLC backdash and a DLC 2K. So what I mean is the 2K low profile things, which is of course very useful, very helpful for being slippery, moving around, dodging anti-airs, dodging certain pressure sequences, stuff like that. And the backdash having the standard invincibility and being 18 frames is a clear advantage because most characters don't have that. That means they have a good amount of invincibility and it's basically impossible to react to their backdash. And then finally, the character is just really good at building resources. Of course, this is like an idealized situation, but Testament is just really good at building meter because of popping stain and how much they're attacking you. And this leads to a lot of opportunity to use resource against your opponent. So main weaknesses for Testament. One is that there's a ton of gaps in Testament's pressure. So common one is you've probably heard that Testament 2K2D has a gap, which means you could do all sorts of reversals here. But it's not just that. Other common pressure sequences from Testament also have gaps. And the ways that they tend to bait these things also can be interrupted. in relatively safe ways. So everything going together would look kind of like this, kind of just guessing. And that's just on one button. There's a bunch of things that Testament has that are like this if you take time to study the character a little bit. There are some small things about mix-ups that make things difficult. So there's a really common mix-up style where people do like 3 overheads or like 1 overhead into a low. So it looks kind of like this. But if you try this with Testament, it's kind of hard to do. There's another variant of something you can do, but it's, again, kind of hard to do. So while Testament has really good pressure, it's hard to set up like 50-50s where other characters can set them up kind of easy. Another thing is Testament's match flow. So I mentioned that Testament has a clear game plan, which is definitely really good, which is you try to do the fireball, you set up the succubus, and you fire the crow. The pace that Testament does these 2 steps compared to some other characters is slower, and there's more tells and there's more counterplay. So if someone was to just, as a simple example, just kind of do this into this, Baiken, her 2H, low profile, so I can, even from pretty far, just do this and go right under it, which means Testament has to kind of like either find hits or pull up in a different way or try to use crow in a different way. Like, you can't like just go from point A to point B, where there's some other characters who have this type of neutral where they have to do something so they could do something else, and they could basically do it without a care in the world. The last one is a little spicy, but I think Testament has a weird red Wild Assault. The good thing is Testament has 2K2D red Wild Assault, which is actually pretty uncommon to have in this game. But some of their tools, especially considering that like you would assume that Wild Assault would be good for a character like this because they have long range and sometimes their cancel options aren't that great. Again, this is kind of circling back to Testament pressure kind of has a lot of gaps. Plus, there are characters who have red Wild Assault that could use them in a really flexible way, basically anywhere, and get big conversions, where Testament doesn't quite have that. So next, we're going to talk about Bedman. Bedman was new in Exerd, so Bedman is back. This character is pretty unusual, has unusual air movement, and always has like unique special moves. So in Exerd, he has the Deja Vu where he sets special moves so he could do them anywhere. In this game, he has the, I don't know what they call them, but basically he has automatic follow-ups that he could do manually or cancel, and he just does them after a different move. Now, his main strengths are really good pressure. He has really good extended pressure sequences, a pretty easy to use projectile, and again, it has a follow-up on it that's pretty much automatic. You can move around, approach, retreat, anything off it. And because of that projectile, he can attack from any range, which I find extremely valuable in this game. He has a bunch of moves that guard crush, which gives him strong strike throw and 50-50s. Like Zato, he has unique neutral, so he's also good at baiting anti-airs. And finally, he just has this super, and this super is really good, especially when you don't know how to fight it. But his weaknesses are pretty clear. So one is, he actually has a pretty good defense modifier, but he has no guts. So this character is really feeling it at the end of his life bar compared to other characters. 2, he's just kind of big, which is not normally that big of a deal in this game, funny enough, compared to a lot of other fighting games. But when he doesn't have anything on him that's following up automatically, he's just really not that mobile, and he's big, and there are a lot of fast characters in this game and a lot of good zoners in this game, so being big is not the best thing in the world when you don't have broken, annoying things. We'll talk about that later. Sorry, the bias leaked out. Another thing is, because he's big, he has a slower jump by 1 frame. This is not really that important until you start getting really good at the game, but it does affect you escaping from stuff. Like, there's some characters that could hold up out of certain mix-ups where characters like Bedman cannot because their jump is slower. Finally, overall, I find his defense to be not very good. So he does have a mash into knockdown, which is great, but he has the heavy backdash, which does have the most invincibility, but it is reactable. So there, a lot of the times they try to use it, especially doing mix-ups and stuff, the opponent can do something about it. His reversal super is slow. He does have super PRC, but his reversal super is just like not the best either. And as a final weakness, he's a character where having white Wild Assault doesn't matter that much, which is kind of funny to say because it's still really good on him. Like, it's actually a strength of his, but compared to the other big bodies of the game, I sort of think he has the weakest one, or like tied for the weakest one. So next we will talk about Elphelt Valentine. So this character is the newest addition to the game. She came out in December in Exerd. She is quite literally my most despised character. I really despise this character. So I have great news for anyone who plays Exerd and doesn't like Elphelt. She's not that great in this game. For now. So in this game, Elphelt has actually been quite simplified. So they changed her shotgun stance to be like this Rekka with follow-ups, which I've talked about a bunch of times, so I'm not actually going to explain how it works. If you want to know how it works, I have like maybe 2 or 3 videos where I go through how it works, how to use it against people, and counterplay against it if you're interested. And then she has pretty good run speed, and she has big normal, so she's kind of like you maneuver in neutral and you pull up, and when you make them block, you try to mix them. So strengths. Number 1 strength by far is how easily accessible her offense is. And a lot of these things are unseeable. It's really, really, really good. Like, I cannot stress how easy and strong it is to do offense with this character. Another strength is that she's just really, really, really fast. Actually, people have said her normals are pretty bad, and we'll talk about like how I feel about her normals when I talk about both strengths and weaknesses. But I actually feel like her speed makes up for some of the weaknesses her neutral has. In addition to speed, she has neutral warping tools like grenade. And what I mean is, this is a move that counters a lot of moves and requires really specific counterplay, which is pretty important in this game, especially from a tournament setting. When you have something where like there's not an obvious answer, or you have to like wait for it or call it out a certain way, or it's like hyper character specific how you deal with it, it's a definite good thing to have. While not as good as some of the other characters I talked about before, she can attack at all ranges, which is great. So not just like projectiles like this, but even things like how fast and how far her Bridal Express reaches. Her buttons are quite large, so that's far slash, 5H, 2S, 2H travels a good distance. Last but not least, she's just really good and positive, so when she breaks the wall, she's really, really, really scary because you're gonna have all this resource to just do a bunch of mix-ups. So weaknesses. So number 1, low HP. Again, the funny gun combo is back just to show how quickly this character explodes. Here she's in a 2-touch situation for sure. She dies really, really fast. So 2 is her normals have a couple weaknesses. So here's Far Slash, for example. It's actually quite a large normal, but it's vulnerable both to 6Ps, but also low profile moves. And quite a few of her buttons have this problem. So buttons like 5K, Far Slash, 5H all have this issue. Again, this I think is mitigated by her speed and how good Grenade is, but it's definitely a problem combined with her having low HP. Her pressure has a lot of spots that are interactable, so if she's fighting as a character that has good defensive options, she has to really, really work around it. And again, she doesn't have a lot of HP, so she's not going to have a lot of opportunities to even like figure out what the opponent is doing in some cases. And right now, having strong defensive tools is valued way more in all the regions than on launch. On launch, I would say it was basically Asia that valued it a lot, but over time, just having strong defense has been valued everywhere. So there are a lot of people who are playing characters with either faster buttons than normal or meterless reversals, and that's definitely minus points for Elphelt. And then finally, her defensive suite is just like really, really average for a DLC character. So when we talk about Testament has like low profile 2K and good backdash, even though the super is not that great. But Elphelt's super, while it hits really far horizontally and vertically, it's not fast. And her 2K is very normal, and really rare for a DLC character, her backdash is normal, like a launch character's backdash. So the next character we're going to talk about is Johnny. So Johnny is another character that, if you played Exerd, terrorized that game. He's a pretty interesting character right now because people really don't agree how good he is, both between skill levels and regions. So Johnny is a character that's not hyper mobile, but he's a 2-step character, which means he likes putting stuff on the screen, and then when things are on the screen, new things happen. So Johnny's is actually pretty good because it turns Mistfinder into an upgraded Mistfinder that has some light tracking, and also adds a highly advantageous guard crush. So first, let's talk about Johnny's strengths. So number 1, for starters, he has just really good range. So this is Far Slash and it's 9 frames, so it's definitely a great Far Slash. 5H is also quite big, 6H is also quite big, and 2H, like Elphelt's, is advancing. So he just has pretty good range in general. Another strength is that his conversion ability is actually quite good between Red Wild Assault and him just having a lot of range. Another good thing about him is how good his mix-ups are and how good he is at keeping people in the corner at this range. This is definitely his ideal range and like one of the best things about him, I would say. He's really good with meter. It enables a lot of mobility options that lead straight into mix-ups. He has good buttons for mashing and controlling space, like 5k, and he has a DOC backdash, really good backdash. And finally, he has high HP, which means he will definitely get 50 meter either from beating you up or getting beat up. So next, weaknesses though. He's vulnerable to mix-ups that characters normally don't have to worry about because he's so tall. What the big one is not being able to dash block, even though he has a step dash. There are two other characters that have step dashes in this game, Leo and Gio, and they both have like just ridiculously strong step dashes because of their ability to dash block. So him not being able to does really matter. I know people harp on it a lot. I know people don't like hearing that a lot, but it's not just about neutral. Even though neutral is a huge thing, not being able to do this in neutral is huge. Like having to actually commit to moving this game without being able to block is huge. But also on defense, dash blocking is really important too. And a lot of characters, like say Baiken for example, he can't pick stuff to hedge bets because he can't dash block. It's actually quite literally one of his by far his biggest issue, and it makes a lot of matchups harder to defend against. Characters like Kai, Soul, Chipp, Gio, Baiken herself, like not being able to dash block on defense really sucks. I don't know what to say. So even though his offense is amazing and his neutral's pretty good, like the dash block thing is a major thing, and that's like the theme of this, like me saying like Elphelt and Johnny are niche. Like they're so good at doing what they do, but their weaknesses really matter. But they look amazing when they're doing what they're supposed to do. The dash jump thing does help, so he actually can dash jump and clear quite a bit of distance compared to before. He cannot do this on launch, so this is helpful, but it's still not the same from a defensive perspective, outside of he can slip out of stuff better than some other characters we're going to talk about later. And then finally, his frame data is kind of poor without turn up once you learn more about the character. So this move is actually quite negative, and depending on your character, you can get really good punishes. It's a little bit hard because Mistfinder doesn't really have like a lot of hit stop, so it's kind of weird to react to, but with a little practice, you can get quite a meaningful combo. And it's not just this, there's other things he has that either like have gaps or like doesn't have the best frame data. So until he gets meter or he gets a card on you, his pressure and buttons are definitely flawed on block. Alright, so the next character we're going to talk about is Potemkin. So it's Potemkin's first time being back out of the bottom group basically since launch. On launch he was actually a pretty decent character, but he was like the poster boy of getting power crept on, with characters getting a bunch of stuff and him getting nothing, or system nerfs. So this is the first time in a while where he's not considered to be in just like niche or a power creep character. So what's good about Potemkin right now? So like I mentioned for a bunch of other characters, he has a really clear game plan. So your goal is to get some type of random knockdown or use armor so that you can set up this, which enables 50-50s. It is especially scary in the corner. Another strength is just the existence of Garda impact in general. This is actually a crazy move, and it might be funny, but I could definitely still make videos about Guard Crush alone, of how silly and ridiculous of a mechanic it is. And he is, of course, the progenitor. He was the original one. Like the first time I saw this, I was like, dude, what is this? Like, why does he have this? So very good move. I'm using Pop Buster kind of lazily here, but his damage output is just pretty high at best, and they continue to improve his conversion ability. So while this doesn't look like much, it gets Potemkin directly into his ideal position, so pretty good. He traditionally has the most HP, so not only can you take a lot of risk with him, but like Johnny, when you get hit a lot, you're going to build a lot of meter, but also when you're beating them up, you're going to build a lot of meter and you kill quickly. The character is amazing with resource. So between neutral skips like this, so he pulls up with armor and cancels into like his best move, or using the armor as a clutch and canceling into Potemkin Buster, or even crazier, using Hammerfall and carrying into the mirror, which is one of the best supers in the game, and it requires very specific counterplay or else you will definitely lose. Having White Wild Assault, definitely a strength, and just having multiple armor and annoying moves, so moves like Slide Head, Hammerfall like mentioned, Mega Fist, Far Slash, 5H, which ties into how good he is with resource, because he's actually pretty good at building resource. So another weakness of Potemkin is that he has pretty poor mashing options. So you know that Potemkin was struggling when the main thing they were asking for was for this to hit crouchers. And it does, but even still, it's not, you know, giving my girl Baiken head pats, you know what I'm saying? Not only that, his buttons are like kind of slow for mashing. So like this is slow, this is slow. So he's kind of forced to use special moves like back Mega Fist and forward Mega Fist. If you're ever annoyed that like it always feels like Potemkin is taking huge risks, like mashing Hammerfall out of pressure or doing Mega Fist, it's kind of because he has to, because his actual buttons are not that great for mashing. Another thing is that he's really reliant on meters, so this kind of ties just into his HP, but all his best stuff, all his scariest things, all his comebacks, basically everything comes from him having meter. All the things you have to worry about for real outside of him like actually earning hits and thus getting this into mix-ups are all generally around meter, which means you could say that Potemkin starts the round later than other characters, which is obviously a flaw. And this last one is not like technically a weakness because he has a lot of HP. This is more like a personality thing because it just depends on whether or not you can accept this. You probably have to get hit to win with Potemkin. He has to take risks. He is not good at mashing and stuff. So if you're the type of person who likes to just like body people, you're not gonna feel very good playing him. I'm kind of talking to myself right now here because I am not, you know, I tend to play characters who have average or below average life, so I'm not that comfortable with the, oh, like my HP is a resource. So if you're not that type of person, then you're going to feel even weaker on defense than he actually is, because you gotta do stuff and take risks with him because it does benefit you in the long run of a round. This is not like a weakness, it's like a person thing that you have to keep in mind. So next character we are going to talk about is Axl Low. So Axl Low is actually one of the definitive counterpick characters in the game. This is actually a character I played in Season 1 for that single purpose. So he is a time-traveling British guy who has big normals. That's basically what he does. Not really known for mix-ups exactly, just having really, really big moves that are hard to challenge. So strengths. He has dumb strong pokes. These moves are really big, disjointed, and very hard to challenge. And just having the ability to whiff liberally in this game is a huge advantage. Like, one of the main things they've nerfed about some characters that are commonly top or high tier is making things easier to whip punish, or some of the reasons why characters have moved up over time is making things hard to whip punish. So he's actually a character who's just really, 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 really hard to whip punish because of the range that he plays at. Beyond just being able to whiff in a game where whiff punishing is extremely rewarding, you also have the fact that he's very slippery. So it's not like he has a special backdash or special movement or anything. It's mostly in that he has a 5-frame low profile 2K. So he's actually very mobile because he can slip under things. He can move away from things to reposition very easily. He can make pokes by hopping over stuff, and this is plus now. Plus some fun meter options, like using Axl Bomber Fast PRC. Finally, and I don't have these because I haven't played him since Season 1, his damage output is overall higher than it used to be. So at launch, he did have Axl Bomber loops that did a ton of damage, so they kind of dialed that back, but then gave him the ability to convert a lot of other stuff. So one of his old weaknesses was actually how you had to hit them a bunch of times, and with his current version, I can't say that's actually a problem. Now, weaknesses. I hope you're ready for the meme, and I hope my editor is not tired of seeing this combo. I'm sorry, Chad, but once again, we used the funny gun combo because he has no HP. He dies very, very quickly. The damage in Guilty Gear Strive is too high, a wise man once said, so getting hit as Axl is certainly pain. His super is kind of trash, so he actually is pretty close to having really good defense, really, because he just has the 5-frame low profile 2K. So his super uniquely is actually incredibly safe on block if you actually block it, but there are a lot of character specific things you can do to punish. And last, he's pretty weak to dash block, which makes him very weak to fast characters. So they've actually been trying to address this a couple ways, between buffing his 2P and his new special move, which requires pretty specific counterplay because some characters can't address it from like here. But overall, he has routinely had a problem against fast characters and dash blocking, especially since if you go back to the beginning of what we said, one really good thing about him is that he is incredibly hard to whip punish. Fast characters can actually do that. That's why Axl players don't like fighting them. So next we get to talk about my favorite character in this game, Faust. So Faust is an item throw character. Since I memed Axl a little bit, I gotta keep it real about Faust. Item throw characters are one of my most despised character archetypes in the entire fighting game genre. And he has a unique twist on it where there's no restriction on the items he could put out. So there's all sorts of situations that could happen when you fight against the character. He also, just like Faust traditionally, has really big normals and just all around good neutral. So strengths, one of course is going to be crawl. Your character's matchup against Faust, a big part of it is going to be how good your character is against crawl. If your character is not good against crawl, you're going to have a really bad time. He has a best in class backwalk, and also just many strong anti-airs, and of course items themselves. Items are really strong because they don't go away on hit, so there are times where he gets hit, but the item will save him anyway. So weaknesses, similar to Axl, he also struggles against fast characters, but he also struggles against characters that just have really big comparable range to him, because one of his strengths is supposed to be good range. So where Baiken kind of struggles because she has comparable range to him, but a lot of the stuff she uses against him is to crawl. Characters like Ram, for example, are really good against Faust because they play in a similar range but have like really good return. This is another character that just dies really fast because he has no guts. He's also tall, so he's vulnerable to stuff a lot of people are not vulnerable to. He's actually extra tall, so you got to keep that in mind on defense if you can force him to stand up. And while the items are strength, he's kind of reliant on RNG or committing to really hard to options to get his best situations. Because his main ideal situations is getting the right item. Well, good job me, right? Just top decked meteors, which is immediate 50-50 from anywhere. But then my next pull could just be bomb, which is like both of us interact. Next pull is hammer, this one's pretty good. Next pull is trumpet, they say it sucks, I say it's fine, right? Or you have command grab, which is a command grab. So while the situation is amazing, you have to commit strike throw on this. So a lot of his best situations, he has to either commit to or get kind of lucky, where other characters, just by them starting the round, they have access to really strong stuff right away. So next we are going to talk about Bridget. So Bridget, as a reminder, if you missed what I said, she's kind of like borderline. Like if someone says, you should have put her one group higher, I'd just be like, fine, honestly. You know, in my head, she's kind of like in the middle. So Bridget is kind of like a fast, slippery, mid-range zoner with really accessible knockdown into setups. So her main strengths are actually having a really well-rounded defensive sweep. So she has like her 2K, backdash, and DP. So she's pretty hard to actually rush down. Pretty stable, straightforward game plan. Your goal is to either just get some type of hit, knock them down, or use some type of resource to set up your yo-yo so you can go into mix-ups. She's really good at pushing people into the corner, has a ton of mix-up opportunities, and most importantly, it's hard to learn how to fight Bridget properly. This is extremely valuable in tournaments. There are times definitely where you see people accidentally win, and having a hard character to learn how to fight is great for preventing things like that. For weaknesses, I hope you're not tired of the biggest meme of the video, but the funny gum combo returns once again because Bridget has no HP. She dies very quickly despite her strong defensive suite. Her damage overall is not that high, even though I have the impression she gains good resource from it, which is great. And there's actually a ton of room for counterplay against the stuff that she does. So while it's hard to learn how to fight her, there's a lot of stuff you can do to counter what she does. A simple example again comes from her 2K. So she's another character that has a 2K 2D gap, which is sort of why I feel like they gave her this buff, because before that had a gap too. So at least she has a way of exiting 2K with a gap. Even then, you can still build up structures where you find ways to challenge or delay things in order to make it hard for her to use certain parts of her offense too easily. So next we have Millia Rage, my lovely old main, and also right now, my main counterpick. So Millia is one of the fast characters in the game, so she's really tricky to catch, very mobile, and has some of the best mix-ups in the game. So for strengths, when I say fast, I am not kidding. She is really fast, and she has higher jumps than other people, and she has extra mobility options that other characters don't have that cancel into each other. She has a best-in-class anti-air, acts faster than any other character in the game out of her air dash, plus has, again, the extra air options make it so that she can really vary how she approaches you once she makes contact with you. And finally, she just has a ton of ways to do mix-ups, and usually she's able to do multiple mix-ups in a quick sequence. Not to mention the mix-up thing being much better in positive, like previous characters we talked about. And as a final strength, she actually has a pretty unique defensive option. So of course she doesn't have a DP, but she has a 4-frame crouching normal to mash on that's also very easy to convert, along with an unseeable backdash. So for weaknesses, I hope you're not tired of seeing it, but the funny gun combo returns because she has second lowest life in the game, which means when you hit her, she really feels it. Her block strings are uniquely weak without meter. So pretty much the main problem is almost every character in the game has an advantageous close slash. So Baiken, for example, she has this +1 close slash right here. I'm sure if you played the game, you're very familiar with this because it will lead to things like this. So Millia's close slash is 2 hits. So while there's use for the 2 hits for sure, the problem is her go-to plus button, which means the opponent gets more time to confirm the situation if you try to take the plus button, which means you're forced to do a lot of like weird things. Also, like many characters we talked about, her pressure has a lot of gaps and a lot of spots where the opponent can interact for high return. So like things like this, or things like this, or the aforementioned 2K2D. I really like using 2K2D as the example because they're just so easy to set up. So we got a bunch of recordings of her doing different follow-ups at the 2K. I could basically gamble off all these relatively safely, and 2K6P is airtight, so it doesn't even matter if I do something there. Kind of just guessing. And the point is, even though she could do stuff that catches stuff, it's definitely in the defender's favor, and it's a really annoying situation to deal with as a melee player, especially because, again, some characters just get to do pressure once they touch you. And then finally, this is probably our first example of this. I could probably have mentioned this for Bridget as well, but also to be fair, because this patch has been a little bit short, I feel like like I said at the beginning, I feel like I've pretty much have a handle on how I feel about all the characters, but Bridget was definitely one of those characters that I'm not too sure of. Millia's supers have a lot of hits. So because of this super having a lot of hits, you actually give them a ton of burst back and meter back. For an example here, my burst is empty right now, but if you look at my burst and meter, so not only do I get a bunch of burst back from the wall splat, but then all the hits of Winger, I got about like 25-ish meter and like 65-ish % of my burst, and my burst is just like coming back. So this is a problem because you will likely have to deal with multiple bursts per round, and definitely burst every single round. And one of the things about playing a character like this is that you're trying to lock them out the game once you hit them, especially considering her pressure is not like super great. So the next character we're going to talk about is JackO. So JackO is a rushdown character and zoner that relies on these minions to help support her both in neutral and rushdown. She's a pretty interesting character. I mean, to be honest, she is classically one of my most despised characters, but at the same time, like, one really good thing about her is because of the nature of the character and what you do with these. Pretty much every JackO player is a unique JackO player, which people definitely need that. As a kind of a little aside, I know there have been times where people are like, some people play these characters the same, or like every character in Strive is the same. I don't think that's true, but I do think we need characters like JackO to make it like obvious for people. I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but I don't know, just a thing that I've always had in the back of my mind. So for strengths, one, again, she's kind of slippery, right? So she has the DLC 2K, so this is low profile, so she can quite easily go under stuff with this button. It's very strong. Plus she has a really good backdash as well. Two, she is just really good at just keeping advantage. She might be like one of the first characters that we talked about that just really keeps advantage really easily in block strings. And there's not a lot of opportunities to really RPS her. So really, it's the main one is when she's setting stuff, and when is she going to use Wild Assault if we're talking about neutral. Or an easier way of putting it is that when she doesn't have minions, you have far more chances of guessing against her than when she does. She has great anti-airs. So between things like 2K, where if she's standing here, I hit this no problem, but her 2K will make my IDJS whiff. But then she has a crouching anti-air as well in 2S, plus the standard 6P, and a preemptive 6H that hits kind of like Axl 6K. And finally, the character herself is fast, not in movement. So if you look at her move around the screen, she's not like very fast, but in action. So she's doing a lot of stuff that builds resource. And if you let her cook, she's gonna clutter the screen. Her weaknesses, again, I hope you're not tired of seeing this combo, but again, she does not have a lot of HP, which is good for the world, because if she was a tank doing what she was doing to us, it would be hard in these streets to say the least. Again, I did mention that she's fast acting, but the character herself is not very fast, and she doesn't like travel very far, so she actually is really bad at escaping the corner despite having the good backdash or the good 2K. And finally, her defense is not that great, so she has this super. This super used to be worse because it used to be a grab, now it's a strike, so it's a little bit better, but still pretty slow. Her mashing options are pretty standard, so while this is an amazing move, it's not like particularly fast. It's just good that she can do it from crouching and has really good low profile. So really, like, her best thing is that she's good at mashing backdash, and that if she gets out, she gets to start trying to do her game plan again. And then the next character we're going to talk about is Baiken. So Baiken is a mid-range all-rounder type with a pretty unique defense plan because of parry. So she's really good at like keeping space, but then once she hits you, she has like some of the best mix-ups in the game. And also when you get close to her, you have to worry about her unique defensive options. So strength, she has pretty much the best throw in the game. When you do a throw, you apply tether right away, which leads to really good mix-ups, all sorts of mix-ups. Her mix-up in general is good. She's got instant overheads, unseeable cross-ups, and more. I hope you're not tired of seeing the funny gun combo, because her peak damage is really high because of the funny gun. And while they've tweaked stuff about her damage since she's come out, things like nerfing close slash and comedy, overall her damage is definitely in the higher group for this game. Really good mid-range neutral, so she has one of the best far slashes in the game. H comedy is just a great screen control tool, and then a shield in ID back to Tommy. She's overall good at every phase in the game. Like, her pressure is not weak, her mix-up is not weak, her defense is not weak, and then her knockdown is not weak. So she's basically good at like every important thing to do in the game. And because of her defense, it is very annoying to rush her down, and a lot of commonly picked characters are strike throw characters, and she can interact with their offense quite a bit with a lot of game knowledge. So what is this character's weaknesses then? So the number one weakness she probably has is one you haven't heard for a while, and is actually her conversion ability is pretty bad. There's a lot of stuff she can't convert that's pretty important that other characters would be able to convert, either something like Wild Assault or they just naturally can. Whether or not you're able to convert something requires a lot of experience to actually do well. And there are also times where her conversions are just really finicky for all sorts of reasons. Some of them are because of the change to Yozan-sen of it sending you away instead of just popping you up. She is extremely weak against a full screen offense. So we've talked about a lot of characters who can attack at all ranges, like Bridget and like Elphelt, Testament kinda, and we're gonna talk about more later. And Baiken is actually very weak in this range. This is not a place she wants to be. She wants to be here. Now the problem is that you can be bursted to the spot where she sucks at. So there's some characters that can do that to her. Characters that do this, there are a bunch of them that are also very good. So you have to just worry about that all the time. And finally, you definitely have to take risks to win. And more extreme risks than some characters, because you have to do some of these things from a defensive position, which means considering risk return, you have to be like, if I'm wrong, I'm going to die, but I have to do it. From a tournament perspective, this is extremely scary to do, and personally, especially if you either watched me play fighting games for a long time, or if you've known of me for a long time from other games, I'm not really known for being a big gambler or risk taker, and especially in a game where everyone's converting a lot, having to take a lot of risks like this, or let's say not taking a lot of risks, but having to just be like, I need to take this risks even though the numbers are not in my favor, is definitely a pain point of playing the character. Alright, the next character we're going to be talking about is Anji. So Anji's on the other side of the defensive coin of Baiken. So instead of having the emphasis on blocking and turning situations around from defense, he kind of does it from neutral using his spin. If I meme about Axl, gotta meme about Anji. So if the Axl meme is that people who like whiffing pick Axl, then people who like swinging pick Anji, because Anji's spin makes it so that your opponent can't really swing into you, but you could definitely swing into them. So, main strengths. 1, this character is a tank. I hope you're not tired of seeing the funny gun combo, but it actually doesn't do that much damage to Anji in comparison to a lot of other characters. He has a ton of HP. He also has the most guts in the game by far, so I believe he's like top 5, definitely top 7 HP in the game. Not counting special things like Asuka, of course. The guard point move itself warps neutral quite a bit because people need really specific counterplay to it. They needed counterplay to it on launch. Since launch, they added this follow-up, which punishes the thing that used to really help against spin. So because of this, it's really difficult to swing into Anji while he still has some of the same weaknesses he's had since the game came out. And then finally, kind of like Potemkin actually, he's really good with meter, and he's definitely going to get it because, again, he has a lot of HP, so it's either you beat them up and then you get meter. So his conversion ability has actually also gone up quite a bit since the game came out, but in the current state of the game, I wouldn't say his conversion ability is super standout, even though if you played Anji, by the way, the whole game, you're like, oh my god, Anji can combo up so much stuff. So I definitely am feeling you on that. What I'm saying is though, compared to the majority of the cast, because the majority of the cast also has really good conversion ability, I don't think he's stand out in that regard. He's really, really good with meter, and you'll get it from beating people up or getting beat up because he has high HP, high guts. So, weaknesses. So one is that he's pretty weak to dash block. So funny enough though, because he's not a zoner, but his buttons just don't have like the best frame data. Like basically almost everything he does is negative, which leads us to just his general poor frame data. Having either good buttons to mash with that are big, or having unique defensive options like a 3-frame button or something, makes his pressure much harder to do and his buttons just much harder to use. And a lot of the stuff that he does tends to have solutions, difficult solutions to be fair, but they tend to. So let's talk about spin, for example. So here I actually have 3 recordings. I have spin into fusion, spin alone, and then just like run up far slash. So while this would look like a hard situation because you have to deal with, oh, he's gonna spin into me, like I want to do far slash, I don't want him to just run up. Honestly, a fine solution to this is just to dash block into him, and if he does far slash, it's fine. He doesn't have great options off this. If he does fusion at all, then you go into the various follow-ups that you practice, aka trying your best to react to the follow-ups. So next character we're going to talk about is Happy Chaos. So we're starting to get to a point where, all the characters have weaknesses, but we're starting to get to the characters where their weaknesses are really small. Like at the beginning we were talking about, oh, this character has no HP, or their pressure can be solved, or like they take too long to get started or something, where while these characters definitely have weaknesses, they're really on the smaller side, negligible side even. So Happy Chaos, pretty unique character. Haven't really seen a character like him. He's basically a resource-based character that has a lot of control, and his options are based on what he has applied on either you or himself. This character has been a villain of this game for basically since the middle of season 1. He's been really, really strong. He's won both the offline evos in Las Vegas, so really, really represented character in this game. And this is probably the weakest he's ever been since release. Normally he's considered top tier, or like top 3 or top 5 or something. So this is the first time he's not in like the blatantly winning group, even though he's still quite strong. So strengths, 1 is just his god tier conversion ability, just absolutely everything combos. And when I say everything, I really mean everything. Like he has the ability to convert hits that other characters would not really be able to. So obviously this is not like the best combo with him of all time, but he's like retreating and starting a combo where Baiken would get nothing without meter here. And also many characters would get nothing without meter here. He has super easy access to mix-ups, just like really amazing control and threat. And most importantly, because he's so common, he's very highly developed. So Happy Chaos players are just prepared for a lot of stuff. There's a lot of people who play him and a lot of people who worked on him and worked to improve him. Now for weaknesses, a big one is that this character donates bursts. Again, this combo is not the best combo of all time, but between how many hits he has to do, plus his super being a ton of hits, I went from no burst to like almost 70 or even 75% burst. So even when he baits your burst, it's actually not that big of a deal because his damage is down. Speaking of damage down, he doesn't do that much damage most of the time. So unless you really screw up, you're not taking a ton of damage for being incorrect. So compared to before, he really has to hit you multiple times to win. And last but not least, he's kind of like high maintenance. So this is like not a big weakness if you just main him. But if you noticed, there are more players who are trying to explore the field a little bit to cover character weaknesses, because every character has at least like 1 or 2 losing matchups. So in his case, especially with his current position, there's stuff he struggles with that he didn't used to struggle with. So keeping him very good, but then also working on another character is actually like kind of difficult. In my case, the characters I tend to pick for counter picks, because I also think Baiken is pretty high maintenance. They're either characters I used to main, so Millia, straight up, I used to main, so not that bad, or characters I just think are easy and like relatively low maintenance. So Testament is a character I play for fun, for quite a bit, and also is relatively low maintenance. Ram is pretty low maintenance. Mostly, you don't want to play multiple hard characters, and you want to be like switching back and forth between tournaments. He also is not that great at escaping the corner, so while he has really good mashing ability, because again, everything combos, he doesn't really have any special defensive options. So his super is this, which has no invul, and his other super is super focus, which also has no invul, thank god. So his main meter option is to try to use YRC. So while his YRC is incredibly strong for sure, he's just not really good at fighting his way out the corner. And usually the main reason why people get out with him so easily is that they're so focused on his ground stuff that he gets away with things like this, which admittedly is kind of hard to deal with unless you practice against it a lot. So the next character we're going to talk about is Ino. So Ino is a pretty unique character in this game. She has a lot of unique movement options and really strong mix-ups. And the main trade for having like really strong offense is that the opponent can gamble against it, because nobody can react to what she's doing. She gets to really play a lot of guessing games with the opponent that can lead to good reward. So the main strength for her is just how good her mix-up is. So she has very fast dash, and she has ways of following up things, not to mention meter options. She has pretty good anti-zoning in Capicola and using dives on reaction to things. But on top of that, she's pretty slippery too. So not only does she have like pretty big buttons, but she also has like low profiles, and she's able to weave in and out in ways that other characters cannot. She has actually a pretty traditional anime backdash, which is pretty rare for this game. And what I mean is that most characters have actually pretty short backdashes, where Ino's air backdash is quite long. So she's able to retreat and approach at kind of her own pace. And finally, with the addition of Red Wild Assault and a new special move, her combo conversion ability is just way better than it was on launch. Words cannot describe. Ask any Ino player what her combos were like what it took to win with the character on launch, and they'll tell you it feels like she's a completely different character now, just because of how much more consistent her game plan is from better conversion ability. So for weaknesses, ironically, after talking about all these things about how she can weave in and out and stuff, she's actually somewhat linear as a character as far as movement, because her forward movement is all uniquely committal, for lack of a better word. As if she's coming at you from this angle, or this angle, or this angle. So there are characters that can cover multiple of the, let's say, lanes she likes to approach in at the same time, compared to a character that's like dash blocking, where you know they're dash blocking, but they also are kind of like masking what they're doing. Her offense actually has a lot of places where you can interact. So while her offense is really strong, you do have to definitely take into account that you have to overextend, which means the opponent can do stuff against it. And right now, characters with good defense are pretty popular right now. I hope you're not tired of seeing this combo, because once again, it's another character who has some low HP. Again, this kind of matters just because in case you're wrong or something, you're just going to take a boatload of damage. And one thing is that this is not like a weakness, but pretty much probably at the end of 3.0, a lot of people thought Ino was just straight up top tier. A lot of this is dictated by Wild Assault. If you're an Ino player, I feel like you have this fear of like patches matter so much more to you, because your character's life is basically dictated on her conversion ability, and the main reason I actually have her being down compared to last patch is really just because they nerfed Wild Assault. If they didn't nerf how much burst damage Wild Assault did, then she would definitely still be pretty much a top tier character. So the next character we are going to talk about is Asuka or Kreutz. Asuka, so this character pretty much is the Captain Olimar of this game. So he's really cheesy. He has a pretty high skill floor. What you're basically doing is cycling through a bunch of spells and managing his resource at the same time to keep up neutral offense and block straight offense. His number one strength more than anything else is he's just really hard to learn how to fight properly, and some characters can't fight him properly, like the one that is standing opposite of him, Baiken. It is pretty difficult to deal with all sorts of his just honestly casting spells. You know, he also has multiple ways to win, which is great. So typically an Asuka player's main goal is to go into test case 3 and do one of two things. It's either bookmark into infinite meter, or it's set up a bunch of mix-ups by having the dice coming at you. So he's pretty flexible in what he wants to do. His neutral control is quite good because of the cubes, and he has a top class burst situation. He is really good when he bursts you. In some cases, when characters burst him, he's winning. So for weaknesses, overall his defense is pretty poor, so he does have mash into combo, but only on 2 spells really, just the water cube and the explosion. He does have a DPA, but it's pretty slow. For reference, it is slow enough that I can do S-Comedy into jab and I'll block the DP. So it's pretty slow. You can't do this to a character like Soul. Like many characters, he play mid-range to full screen zoning. He is weak to fast characters, but he's also weak to characters who have really active moves. So for example, we have the fire cube here. To be honest, the previous batch, Baiken basically could not do anything about this. All of these things are character specific, but you see how like I'm just trying to do whatever and it's not working? The main weakness of the cubes end up being really active moves. Characters like Ino and Faust and Nago clear these basically mindlessly, and your character probably has at least some type of sequence that can clear a bunch of cubes. He also is pretty hard to play. Like I said, he has a high skill floor, so even though he's really silly and I really don't like the character's design, it's really hard to learn how to play him properly, especially since he has the highest HP in the game with the mana, but then by far the lowest without. Despite this gap, when you're not that good with him, you end up mismanaging and then you do a ton of damage to yourself. I also had this problem when I was picking him up. And of course, because of that, he's high maintenance. So you're going to run into characters like Nago and Faust, who you might want to counterpick, but your options end up being pretty limited because you're playing a character that is very high maintenance. So you are pretty much limited to playing really simple characters to keep up your skill level with Asuka. The next character we're going to talk about is, funny enough, one of the most misunderstood characters in this whole game, Giovanna. I heard a lot of people describe Giovanna as the Cammy of the game, and I think that's probably the simplest way to describe her. So if you have not touched Street Fighter for some reason, she's basically like a faster than normal all-around type character with seemingly simple pressure, but actually lots of ways of stacking offense on you that's pretty scary. And also very slippery outside of just being fast. So for her first strength is her god tier dash. So she has a step dash where she's allowed to block, and she has a lot of control over how far she goes. And they've actually given her more and more control over this since the game has come out. She has a really good strike throw, so she has unique frame data. She's one of the characters that's blessed with a +3 close slash, but then also she's gotten buffs like being able to enhance special moves. So by enhancing Spiral Arrow, you get a really strong strike throw where there's much less the opponent can do if they actually block the move. She has amazing combo conversion ability. Excuse my really bad Joe combo. I have not really played her since season 1, end of season 1, beginning of season 2, so I'm pretty behind on what people are doing, but they use enhanced DP to convert things. She basically converts all her hits. If you hit someone with Geo, you should expect to get some type of knockdown, which is very good. So like I mentioned before, she's slippery, so not just the dash, but also her dash jump goes incredibly far. Plus she has anti-air options in Air Super. And finally, she just has so many ways of mixing up between fuzzies, meter usage, big body only fuzzies, all sorts of mix-ups that all lead to combos or break the wall. And finally, for real, is the buff she gets with meter. So this is actually one of the secret good things about her. So Right now she has 100 meter, so she has, I believe, the same HP as Potemkin, and all her attacks do chip damage. So you are actually taking damage for both blocking and getting thrown. She also gets a buff at 50 meter where she does do chip damage, but significantly less than 100 meter. And her defense goes to 0.97, I believe. So she overall has really good life because she converts really easily. She builds meter really quickly. So she actually takes less damage the longer a match goes, which is pretty good. If you are a beginner or even intermediate in this game, go back and watch some like high level Geo players and notice how they don't really use their meter unless they're like, yeah, I'm trying to mix. You won't actually see them use meter on things like this too much because of how strong the meter boost thing that she has actually is. So for weaknesses, so one is that it's actually pretty uncommon that she can loop mix-up. So what I mean is, like, if you take a character like Baiken, so Baiken can like do a mix-up. So I did a low, empty low, and now I could just do another mix-up, I could do another mix-up, I could do a little mix-up. So as long as like I hit you with a mix-up, I can keep doing mix-ups basically until you interrupt me somehow, either with burst or guessing right with deflect shield or something, or you die. Considering some of the characters we talked about so far, where some of them have low HP, you don't get a lot of chances. There's actually slightly more than half the cast. If Baiken throws them, she 2-touches them. So some people just have no time, right? Geo has great mix-ups, but it's pretty uncommon she can loop them. Usually you have to like sequence things in order to do mix-up into mix-ups. Simple example is this, right? We'll use the 50 meter for example. You hit me with the fuzzy, you break the wall, so you do go into positive, which is great. So you're gonna get resource to do things to me a little later. But here, she doesn't really have like a 50-50. Show 4K used to hard knockdown, so she almost was able to do this, but this is always something she like didn't quite have. Basically, for the safety of the world though, it would be crazy if this character could loop mix-ups, because when she does get mix-ups, they're really good. She has stubby normal, so of course she has really great moves like the sweep, famously the sweep, great dash and stuff, but one pretty nice thing this game does is that characters that are pretty fast tend to have to get close to you. So even though she's really good at whip punishing, if you're actually good at protecting yourself, it's actually pretty annoying for Geo to get in, especially if you come up with a plan to fight dash blocking, because of course with a dash like this, she is going to really like try to dash block into you. Finally, her pressure overall has a lot of interaction points. So this is actually a plus and a minus. So basically every single button she does has counterplay if you really look at it. For a simple example, like many others, I'm going to be using kicks. So it's going to be 5k to throw, dash 5k to 6p, dash 5k to 5k again to repeat the situation, dash 5k delay jump cancel, and dash 5k into 2 and 4k. So her 5k is -2. And without practice, it's actually pretty hard to react to and deal with. But this can be mashed pretty much no problem, backdash, etc. Now for 6p, you can't mash this because it's a 1 frame gap. So your throw will lose, your backdash will probably lose. Then you have 5k. So in the case of you being scared, you know what to do. They repeat the situation. Here, this is pretty much for people who try to throw. And finally, this is for mashing also with higher return. But the point is you can do something. So we can cycle some options, and depending on what happens, she could be in a pretty bad situation. So I'm kind of cycling just a couple core options of delay mashing, throwing, and parrying with varying results. But pretty much every button she does has counterplay, and that's nice because every Geo player has a different approach to doing offense. So it's not like she's solvable, it's just that you have to deal with the fact that the opponent can do stuff about basically everything you do, with some small exceptions once you get like a resource or get a throw, enhanced spiral arrow, things like that. So next we are going to talk about Chipp Zanuff. Don't worry, no corny Barbie movie beams here. So Chipp is a little similar to Millia in that he's a very fast all-rounder, but he is far more balanced as an all-rounder. instead of Millia. So Millia is a lot more about being sneaky with mobility and mix-ups, where Chipp is actually much more straightforward as a character. He's pretty much a standard character that's good in all phases of the game, and his main thing is that he is just ridiculously fast, aka truly the fastest character in the game. So for strengths, of course, his god tier speed, he's just way too fast, making him really hard to handle for slow characters. He has great defensive tools, so he's got his jab, a DP, and a far traveling backdash. So even though it's standard as far as numbers, he actually goes quite far on his backdash. He's able to act faster out of his IAD than basically all the characters in the game except for Millia. And finally, he's just good at building resource, especially because his pressure is kind of ambiguous. So for weaknesses, guess what's back? The funny gun combo. Chipp basically has the lowest HP in the game. He actually has pretty decent guts, but he has by far the worst natural, let's say, defensive modifier. So when he messes up, it is a big deal. He's really weak to kicks, so pretty much a lot of his best pokes all struggle against low kicks, especially if they're just straight up low profiles and just kicks in general. Definitely the most annoying thing about playing Chipp, but similarly to playing Elphelt, anytime like characters have really good kicks, outside of a couple exceptions, he basically just run into your buttons, so I think it's kind of okay. His pressure, like Geo, has a lot of points of that can be interactive with as well. So his Rekka is strong, but it is negative, and there's things you can do about it. And you can straight up mash Gamma Blade, and your return is going to vary drastically by your character. So as an example, it's pretty hard for Baiken to actually get a combo for hitting Chipp out of Gamma Blade, where there's some characters who do it like trivially. So to be honest, Chipp is just really good. I think he's like borderline top tier, frankly. But the main thing that's really keeping him down is that he's another character that's really feeling the effect of Wild Assault being nerfed, because really the reason why I thought he was so busted last patch was that he had all these things plus Wild Assault. So even though he had like, oh, you know, you could mash out his pressure in spots if you guess right, and he's weak to kicks, once he hits you from anywhere on screen, he's going to break the wall. It's unlikely you're able to burst. And then it's Chipp, who's supposed to have like the lowest life and like mediocre damage, now have a 10% defense boost and damage boost and positive last forever, and he has infinite block strings on top of that. So not very fun fighting against, but he really just doesn't have that many flaws, frankly. And now for the winners. So first we are going to start with Kiske. Okay, so I learned recently that apparently the entire Guilty Gear community, besides maybe a few actuallys, have been pronouncing Kai's last name wrong and Sin's last name wrong. I've been calling Kai Kiske forever. Kyle Kiske even, and he's Kyle Kiske. We're just all fucking up. I don't really know. Anyway, Kai is the poster boy all-rounder. Can attack from any range, good mid-range pressure, solid frame traps with good reward when he applies the shock state on you. So for strengths, he actually is quite fast, faster than you would think. So for a character that can zone you when he feels like it, and play mid-range when he feels like it, and rush you down when he feels like it, being fast is really good for him in this game. He's pretty good at whip punishing into knockdowns. His damage is quite high in shock state, so there have been like some recent events where I would see a Kai player hit somebody, and I'm like, you know, he's gonna break the wall, he's got like one more chance, and then the character just dies, and I'm shocked. No pun intended, I'm shocked. And he has good defense, so for him, it mainly comes from the fact that he just has a DP. Besides having a DP, his defensive suite is pretty standard. Like, none of his buttons are especially fast. Fastest buttons like 5 frames. He has a standard backdash. A lot of things he has a standard. So the main things would be DP and then also the stun dipper, but they've nerfed the low profile and stun dipper since launch, so it's not as good as it used to be, but it's still pretty good. So his main weaknesses is that he's just like really straightforward. So he's really easy to understand, really easy to learn how to fight, and his pressure has a lot of interaction points. So when he's correct, he kills you, but there's a lot of spots where you can choose to fight back because a lot of these things are negative. So especially from here, like when you're in mid screen, the return is not that crazy unless he uses Wild Assault to convert, where here, this is where it's really scary, because while you can fight back, and you definitely can fight back, if he hits you here, you are dying. Also keep in mind too that there are a bunch of characters we talked about that are not that great at escaping the corner. The next character we're going to talk about is Mei. You might have heard me on stream talk about Mei, but Mei is basically a character where every patch they say she gets nerfed, and almost every patch she ends up being top tier anyway, with probably like, I want to say maybe 2 exceptions. And season 3.0 and 3.5 is yet another one where she's again really good. So Mei is actually, most people find it hard to define what she is, and most people honestly just call her like a haha funny or funny dolphin, but she is really like a counter poke character that also is really good at applying offense for high return. So main strengths, again, pretty fast, surprisingly fast, with a very strange jump arc. She's also quite difficult for people to anti-air because of her jump arc, so she could just alter or retreat to alter her approach, so something like this. So if you try to anti-air, I tried 6P and I got hit by air dash back GH. Her RPS points are pretty quick, especially because she has follow-ups like leap. You have this. Her conversion ability is really good, especially on counter hit. This is far from the best combo, but just an example of how she can use Wild Assault just immediately, and her goal is getting counter hits, so it's not that unusual to see something like this. Outside the combo just being one I made up in a couple minutes. And finally, she has really good guts, so again, at the end of her life bar, she's really not dying. You might recall there were characters before, so I've been using 25% HP to show this, but there were many characters before that died from this pretty early, after maybe like a couple of hits, where Mei will endure. So for weaknesses, honestly, she really doesn't have a lot. Like, her main struggle is that she's doing a lot of the attacking, so she's doing the dolphin, she's doing the leap, she's doing the jumping, she's doing the dashing, she's doing the poking. So when a character can fight normals versus normals really well against her, it could be kind of annoying for her to get in. There's not that many characters that are super good at this though, and she usually out-returns people, especially because she's preempting into counter hits, but it is something to keep in mind. So for example, like in 2.5, I was pretty sure that Baiken beat Mei. There's some people who didn't agree, but I also had a really good record against the character. And while Baiken still has the same neutral advantages overall, Mei's a little bit more slippery this time. Plus, there is more threat of taking big combos earlier from counter hits because of Wild Assault. The next character we had to talk about is one of the goats of the game, Leo Whitefang. It might sound funny, but Leo is yet another all-rounder, but his unique thing is that he uses charge inputs to play the game, so he has a charge fireball and a DP, plus the step dash. So these things actually make him a really stand out in this game because he can do a lot of reactionary things. He can react to a lot of points of pressure with DP. If you're turtling too much, he can simply fireball you, and then his dash block is one of the best in the game. So for strengths, his throw is another top class throw. He immediately gets to go into back turn, which means amazing return off throw. And easy, super strong mix up. So you just straight up have like unseeable left right, or you have unseeable overhead, low into cross. You just have so many options to mix people up, and it takes a lot to prepare for, considering how easy it is to do and how rewarding it is. His defense is super good, so between just mashing and reaction DP, it's just really hard to open up Leo. Again, like I mentioned at the beginning, he reacts to a lot of stuff with DP that people do. He has super good neutral, so between his great dash block and then his guard point, which is really hard to deal with, and even in cases where he's back turn and is playing neutral and back turn, he's just all around a really good consistent character in neutral. So for weaknesses, he really only has 2 major problems since the first round of nerfs he got. So one is that his dash doesn't go very far, so you can keep him out. So the main strength of dash block is that you dash into people's negative stuff, but they just keep coming out with characters that are not negative from these ranges while he's trying to come in. Or if you understand his counterplay against it, you can start showing things that are plus that he could run into. The other thing is his mix-up is interactable and has a bunch of counterplay. Again, it's difficult to learn for sure. I feel like I reference this every time we talk about the character, but my teammate Jonathan Tene made a video in season 2 about how to defend Leo back turn properly. Just being able to do this will make your life so much easier against this character, because if you can't do this, you're just in the rabbit hole once he's in back turn. And honestly, that's really it. Like, this character is truly one of the goats of the game. Then the next character we must discuss is Ramlethal Valentine. Ramlethal is a mid-range character. I won't say she's totally all-around because she doesn't play full screen super well without resources. So she's really like this mid-range character that excels at keeping you in the corner, repeating her turn, and just pushing until she gets a high damage hit. So for strengths, she just has really godly buttons. So her far slash and 5H play in ranges that are super annoying for a lot of characters to deal with. Her kicks are just top class, like really fast, hard to deal with. Her jump kick as well, also really good, and she gets hard knockdown off it. Top class air vs air, counter poke tools, good dash walk. She has a fast dash, not run, so once she actually starts running, she's not as fast as she used to be, but her initial dash is still quite fast, basically the same as launch. I'm sure if you watch anyone play this game before, you have seen extended pressure sequences like this. She's really good at not just doing long pressure sequences, but also confirming the opponent's guard type and counterattacking it, which is extremely strong and valuable in this game because not that many characters are super good at doing it and have as many opportunities to do it as Ramlethal does. Her classic weakness was conversion ability, but with the addition of Wild Assault, they made her conversion ability much better. Her weaknesses, once again, here it is. The funny gun combo. This character dies pretty fast, but she's like basically on the line, so she actually has the same HP as Ino. So this is Ram and Ino are kind of my references for these are characters that get 2-touch shock throw from a Baiken perspective. She actually doesn't like fast characters that much, so while she has these really good buttons, they all actually have quite a bit of recovery. So if you're playing like a Chipp, Kai, Geo, any character like that, you can whip punish these moves quite well, which means Ram has to use her kicks, which are amazing to be fair, but being kept out of these buttons is definitely a pain point for her. And then despite her offense being really strong, she doesn't like DPs because if you have like extra defensive options, you have way more spots you can do something than a character that doesn't have meterless defensive options. We have this back and forth when tier list season comes out usually, where I mean specifically Asia region for sure doesn't rate Ramlethal very high, and I really think a huge part of it is that since the game has come out, they've played characters that just do really well against Ram, where we tend to rate her higher because characters play well against Ram, we don't really play so much. Like Chipp is not that common, Geo is not that common, Kai is not that common. So I think that's like one of the big disconnects between our regions. So the next character we have to talk about is Nagoat. That's right, Nagoriyuki, another one of the goats of the game. So Nagoriyuki is almost like a tower defense character. He's not like super mobile, but also he's really explosive and can really just pull up on you from anywhere. And he is really flexible in his options because while he's restricted by his resource, it also opens him up in a lot of unique ways. So for strengths, he is really explosive. So he has multiple, I mean, I joke, I meme a lot, you know, I've been memeing this whole video, right? But I meme about him having multiple teleports. So his main teleport is this Fukyo. That's the thing that makes him move around the screen. But he has this in attacks as well. So he has Beyblade, which is unseeable low, that is special cancelable. So he can actually do stuff off this. He also has this clone projectile that kills other projectiles, but he can also follow up behind the clone and do pressure from pretty much anywhere. And on top of that, there was a patch where they made it so that he could special cancel his actual step into special moves. He has multiple teleports. He just has a bunch of ways to attack instantly when he wants to. There's so many ways he can pull up on you between resource, using blood, and just controlling space so that you can't escape the corner. His return is very high. If you've seen any clip of Nago playing the game, it's always him doing a ton of damage. Bite is just insane and lets him do a ton of mix-ups. They keep giving him like meme changes, so while they'll like nerf him, they'll also give him something super strong of return. And as if his pressure is not good enough, right now he actually has the ability to do high-low mix-ups. So the follow-up of his DP that he can manually control is an overhead that's unseeable, and the Beyblade is a low that's also unseeable. You might be like, man, this uses a lot of resource, but this is an amazing round closer. And if he sneaks in a bite somehow for some way, he'll be able to do it again. Not to mention, he has White Wild Assault. So he has an invincible poke that reaches really far, in addition to unseeable teleports. So one of his main weaknesses is how much more limited he is once he uses a lot of resource. So here he will activate, meaning he's going to take a lot of damage to himself if he does another special move. So while his normals are definitely really great, at this point, his options are definitely more restricted, and this is actually how many characters even stand a chance of fighting him. Once he does use a lot of resource, he actually takes a lot of damage. So at this damage total, actually took quite a bit, right? But if I did the same combo with full life, significantly less. Not only does he have less options overall when he uses a bunch of his blood moves, but he also takes more damage during this time. So finally, I think uniquely with him, you do have to take a lot of gambles that other characters don't. So an easy example is the one I just showed you. So this is a pretty common end of round gambit they do, where they try to get the last hit. The thing about this is though, is that if a character defends this successfully, many characters are just straight up killing him, if not doing 90-95% damage to him. Now, funny enough, because it is one of the goats of the game, sometimes going into Blood Rage and then going back is pretty good for him, because again, you reset all your resources, so you're able to just go, be super powerful, have a lot of teleports, have a lot of plus frames, have a lot of offense again. But I think that's kind of just the nature of the character. Like, depending on your approach to him, you have to be comfortable with taking risks, even though he's good. So the next character is Soul Badguy. So Soul is the poster boy of the game, the protagonist. He's an all-rounder, but more focused on offense. So if you're talking about strengths, one is, despite what people say about him being a strength level character, he actually has a really good mix-ups with meter that are pretty easy to do. He has really high damage, some of the best buttons in the game. So famously, the far slash, that is plus, so he has a poke that he can do from neutral, that is plus, that's really crazy. Flexible approach options between dash blocking, dash jumping, vortex to go under things, bandit bringer to go over things, anti-air with bandit bringer again. Really consistent conversion ability, and top class defense. He has all the frame data you need. He's got the 3 frame 5k, the 4 frame 5 beam. He also has an invincible reversal you have to worry about. If you're gonna talk about weaknesses, he really only has 2 things. It doesn't affect him that much, but you can definitely see when it's a problem in matchups. So one is that unlike Kai, he is not fast. He's not that fast. It may be a surprise because he's not that slow, but he's also not that fast. And as far as movement, a lot of his things are kind of standard. So while he does have unique going over and going under, as far as him coming up at you, he does it in a somewhat linear way. And combine this with the kind of secret one, the secret weakness of his, he kind of has stubby normals. I know it might sound funny because he has stuff like this, but despite this being a top class move, it is him that's advancing into you. So he has to get from here to like here. And there are a lot of characters that play from like here to like here. So he does have to actually get all the way over there. But once he does get in, he does a ton of damage, as we all know. So these are like small points that like doesn't come up in many matches. So next we have to talk about Goldlewis Dickinson. So Goldlewis, so he is a big body kind of bruiser power type, where his point is he gets in and he does really strong pressure, and when he hits you he does a lot of damage. Specifically for him, you guys can't see this. Also, shout out to Lord Chad, he cannot see this either. But I have a notepad where I wrote down like, the point of this video is to like summarize the character. I've made videos where like I talk about a character for like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, breaking down a bunch of pros and cons, and then where I think they kind of are in like the meta. So this, if you haven't noticed, has been an abridged version of that, right? So for strengths, Soul, we just talked about Soul. So for strengths, I wrote down great mix with resource, high damage, some of the best buttons in the game, flexible approach options, great conversions. For Goldlewis, for strengths, I wrote down LOL. Let me explain. Goldlewis, I have been memeing. Goldlewis is a character that if you're struggling in fighting games, you should probably give him a try. Why? So, for starters, he has White Wall Assault. So, he has an invincible poke that's plus and has a guard point. So, in case you have problems approaching, you have that as an option. If you have problems approaching, you also have this. This thing really basically ends neutral. The person has to hit him for it to go away. There was actually a patch where even on a hit, it didn't go away. That's crazy. And as you can see, it travels really far. And air mobility in this game is less than other anime games, so this tool is incredibly powerful. In case that was enough for you, you also have this, which he can do from his burst, and it does not go away on hit either, and it pulls you into him, again, in case you have problems approaching people. This, of course, you need level 3 security and meter, but it is very relevant in matches. He also has one of the best jumps in the game in Jump D. So depending on the context you play this game, you may not think this move is as good as I'm saying it is. On launch, for example, so before people started to agree we should play the game on PS4 Pro, this thing is basically invisible on a base PS4 or a slim PS4. You need to be playing on PS4 Pro, PS5, or PC to even stand a chance of seeing this move. And it also has like just really good options on top of that. He has like top class anti-air, so not just 6p, but this move anti-airs. So I'm gonna either lose or trade basically every time. It is incredibly difficult to actually hit him because you have to clear the 2p, which I tried, but since it has such a low total duration, you know, it's really hard to do. Do you struggle with doing pressure with other characters, strike throw? Well, guess what? If you could do a half circle, you can have guard crushes on all your stuff that is stupidly plus, and you get really easy strike throw because you don't have throw protection after guard crush. If you struggle with mix-ups, he has both a really fast overhead and a really fast low. The low can be comboed off of meterless. In the case you have meter, you can just do it from that as well. In case you still struggle with strike throw, you could also use the drone to do it throw you, because the throw will combo into drone and you can break the wall off that. And of course you can shimmy people very safely with this. Okay, do you not like how your character can't get combos in some situations? Well, guess what? Not only does he get hard knocked out off basically everything, which means he has really good set play too, because you can use the drone for set play, but he has absolute bombos. If he counter hits you, you lose the entire game. Like, words cannot stress how much damage his character does. Is defense a problem for you? He has a lot of HP, which means you are going to get burst back. You are going to build a bunch of meter. He just really has absolutely everything you would want in a character. Now, he does have some weaknesses. His main weaknesses being that he's kind of bad at escaping the corner. So while he has this godly jump, it really does not help when you're trying to keep him with his back to the wall. He has stubby buttons. So while he has stuff like 2P, 5K, 2K, far slash advancing, and his special moves, he really has to rely on jumping, dashing, and using behemoths in neutral, or else his standard buttons are pretty stubby. You don't really see him using like heavy buttons in neutral. Imagine seeing him use like 2H neutral, for example. And admittedly, because of his stubby buttons, he doesn't have the best defense of all time, so he has a slightly better version of the heavy backdash. I believe his backdash is 22 frames total, but his throw is not as big as other heavy characters. He does have super PRC on this and different levels of this, but I don't value that highly, not as highly as having like a 9-frame reversal, and of course not as highly as having a meterless reversal. But this character is really like one of the GOATs right now. He's definitely not a GOAT of the game. He's not like consistently top tier, but when he's top tier, he's seriously a menace. He's so good actually that you unlock a secret character when you play him in tournament, because you can play him really basic in tournament and people won't be ready, and you can kill him really fast. So there you go. That's why I wrote LOL for him. The last character we must talk about is Sin Kiske. Okay, so truly started from the bottom, now we're here. Sin is another, funny enough, notice a lot of the higher rank characters are kind of all-rounders with a twist. So his specifically is that while he can't play all ranges, he's focused on conditioning and playing this range, gambling with his low profile or big buttons. Now, his main strengths is that he's able to go from here to here really fast. So you notice his run is not that great, but you know what is great? Boom. And you can follow this up into a plus follow-up. His damage is actually quite high. His corner conversion ability is really good. So he's able to take from mid-screen to corner to corner pretty well. His defense is really good. Honestly, specifically because his DP is super huge. It hits from very far. I didn't really go into this, but different DPs travel different ranges. So like Kai's basically goes nowhere, goes straight up, or Chipp Chipp's it is 2 hits, so really only the first hit is invul, and that second hit where he's in the air, he's kind of vulnerable. But Sin is really consistent in that his DP is huge and hits really far. That's really, really good. He has really, really good pokes, and he is super good at keeping your back to the wall. Now for weaknesses, I think he just gets camped because since he's not that fast, and his main threat is this, and this. So there are characters that could definitely just like run around and camp him. And he doesn't have air peak driver in this game like Exert, so he can't like jump and meet them very easily air. He does have like this to do that, but he has to run up and do this kind of committal action. Then also his mix-up is not that great, so he does have like tools like, you know, this is overhead, this is unseeable low, this is very plus. So he's amazing, like a top class conditioning character, but he's not like a Baiken or a Leo where they throw you and you're like, oh man, I'm about to instantly lose. I could really just lose because they threw me a single time. And yeah, that's it for the 3.5 tier list. Let me know what your thoughts are. By the time this video comes out, I would have probably also looked at other people's tier lists. Because a lot of people are talking about it because Tempest, good buddy of mine, and also pretty much the best Leo on earth, made a tier list that honestly I mostly like 95% agree with. If you want to see how I feel about other people's tier lists, let me know, because I've really been mulling using my second channel, LordKnight Clips, again for stuff from stream, so definitely low about that. And of course, let me know what you think about this tier list and this style of doing it. I know this is kind of a new way I've done this, where on stream I talk about the characters and show examples, but I think this is the first time I've actually just recorded a tier list instead of exclusively doing it on stream. So let me know how you feel about that. As usual too, any other questions, any other comments, definitely feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you guys feel like it. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.